Sepsis. You've probably heard that word, right? It sounds like a modern problem, a 21st century threat you'd face in a hospital today. But the fight against it actually started over 170 years ago. It's a story about a lone doctor, a brilliant discovery that was laughed at, and a life that ended in the most tragic way imaginable. This right here is the story of sepsis and the forgotten hero who first tried to stop it.
But before we jump in our time machine and head back to the gaslit hospitals of 19th century Vienna, we really need to understand why this isn't just a history lesson. It's an urgent warning for right now.
Take a look at this number, 5.3 million. That's the estimated number of people who die from sepsis every single year, all around the world. That's not some historical figure. It's a staggering number, and it's happening right now. In our lifetime.
And this isn't some forgotten plague that we've got under control. Nope. In fact, just a few years ago, the World Health Organization put a spotlight on sepsis, calling it a major threat to global health. It's a top-tier priority. So how on earth did we even begin to understand this killer? For that story, we got to go back.
Okay, let's set the scene. We're in the mid-1800s. It's a time of amazing scientific progress, for sure, but it's also a time when a terrifying, mysterious illness was stalking the halls of hospitals, especially in the one place that should have been all about new life, the maternity ward.
They called it puerperal fever, or childbed fever. A new mother would give birth, and then, a few days later, this horrific infection would take hold. The joy of childbirth would just turn into a death sentence. It swept through hospitals, and honestly, most doctors just shrugged. They saw it as a terrible but totally unavoidable fact of life.
And you can just feel the frustration in this quote, can't you? A few doctors did have a hunch. They suspected it had something to do with, well, with cleanliness, with hygiene. But their ideas? They were just dismissed. The established medical community, all the big-shot professors and physicians, they just wouldn't listen.
But one doctor, he refused to believe that these deaths were just inevitable. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis. He was a young Hungarian doctor working in Vienna, and he was about to blow this whole mystery wide open.
So, Semmelweis was faced with his absolutely baffling puzzle. The hospital where he worked had two different maternity clinics. They were right next to each other, but in one clinic, women were dying at a horrifyingly high rate, and in the other, the death rate was way lower. What was going on?
He looked at everything, and then he spotted one huge difference. The first clinic, the one with the high death rate, it was staffed by medical students. The second, much safer clinic was run by student midwives. So what were the medical students doing that the midwives weren't? Well, they were performing autopsies. Just picture it. They would go straight from the anatomy lab, dissecting corpses, right into the maternity ward to deliver babies, often without even washing their hands.
That's when the light bulb went off. Semmelweis came up with his radical hypothesis. Some kind of cadaverous poison, that's what he called it, was being carried on the hands of the students from the dead bodies to the new mothers. So he ordered a simple but totally revolutionary intervention. Starting in May of 1847, every single student had to wash their hands in a chlorine solution before they could enter the maternity clinic. The result? It was nothing short of a miracle.
Look at this. The results were immediate, and they were undeniable. The death rate in that first clinic just plummeted. It went from a terrifying 16% all the way down to less than 1%. He'd done it. He was saving lives with a simple bowl of chlorinated water. The proof was right there in the numbers.
Now, you'd think this would make him a hero, right? That they'd be naming hospitals after him. But this is where the triumph takes a sharp, tragic turn. Semmelweis' amazing discovery, it wasn't celebrated. It was attacked. The medical community was furious. Think about it. The idea that they, the esteemed doctors, were the ones carrying death on their hands, it was a massive insult. So Semmelweis was ridiculed, his contract wasn't renewed, and he was basically run out of town. And his life ended in an asylum where, and this is the most horrific twist of all, he died from sepsis after being beaten. He was a victim of the very same disease he taught the world how to prevent.
You see, Semmelweis had figured out the what, but he didn't really have the why. His big breakthrough was based on observation, but he couldn't give a scientific explanation for what his cadaverous poison actually was. For that piece of the puzzle, the world would have to wait for another scientific giant to enter the scene.
So this was the big missing piece. What was this invisible killer, this thing that could be so easily washed away with chlorine? The answer would end up revolutionizing not just medicine, but our whole understanding of what makes us sick.
And that answer came decades later.
thanks to the legendary Louis Pasteur. As you can see here on the timeline, his work proved that these tiny, invisible microorganisms, bacteria, were the cause of decay and disease. And then, other scientists found those exact bacteria in the blood of women who had died from childbed fever. The poison wasn't some mysterious gas, it was a living thing.
And with that, Semmelweis was finally, tragically, proven right. Germ theory gave his work the scientific backbone it had been missing. The invisible killer finally had a name. The ghost in the hospital had been identified.
Which brings us right back to today. Semmelweis and Pasteur, they laid the foundation for everything we know. But the battle they started? Yeah, it is far from over. Our understanding and the enemy itself just keep evolving.
You know, our actual definition of sepsis has been refined again and again over the years. We went from seeing it as this kind of general inflammatory response back in '91 to having a much more specific understanding of organ dysfunction today. We're just getting smarter and smarter about how we identify it.
And here it is, the modern definition. It's not just about having an infection. It's about your body's own response to that infection going completely haywire and starting to attack your own tissues and organs. It's a long way from cadaverous poison, but the threat is just as deadly.
And this brings us to the final and frankly pretty chilling part of the story. This warning from the World Health Organization feels like we're coming full circle, doesn't it? The very magic bullets we created to fight bacteria, antibiotics, they're starting to fail us.
So as we face this future with drug-resistant superbugs, that simple, powerful lesson from a doctor who died in tragedy more than 150 years ago has never been more important. Prevention, hygiene, washing our hands. In the end, the simplest defense just might be our best one, a timeless legacy from the tragic father of infection control.